Hi, my name's Kevin McQuillan, and the following pre-recorded conversations are my attempt to make sense of the human experience through the practice of yoga. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to your day two. Day two. It's day three. Welcome to your day three of your yoga teacher training. Time is flying by. Already day three. I like to say the days every day, just so you track and get a sense of where we are and where you are in your journey. And at some point, what you'll notice is this week will be over. That'll happen very soon. Absolutely. And to be able to track yourself in time and space, get a sense of where you are in your experience here. Although it may not feel like it now, soon this will be over. That's how it works. We're here and then we're not. And our experience running these programs is the first week feels long. It's like, feels like I've been here for 2.5 months. This is nuts. And the second week goes by very quickly. Very quickly. And saying that out loud for a reason. To continuously anchor yourself in this experience over and over again. And to make the best of your experience during your time here. There's various different things that you're pursuing in your life that is true. You've been speaking about them in various different ways. And this is often how it goes. It's like this is what we want, and this is what we have to confront to get what we want. Last night's conversation was like that. What are you up against? What are you grappling with? What's a tension spot in your life? And you're answering those questions. And that's a current challenge in your life that most likely you'll have to confront and overcome. And if you're able to overcome, what's waiting for you is the very thing you say you want. It's on the opposite side of this conflict point, this tension spot in your life. And there's a particular school of thought that goes something like this: it's better to have a problem than no problem. It's very curious when you think about that. It's better to have a problem than no problem. A problem gives you something to pay attention to, grapple with, tangle in, and potentially grow. And you know what happens when we're challenged? There's a particular skill set that has to be developed to solve a problem, to overcome a challenge. And if you look at your life, that has definitely occurred many times over. And an element to that is curiosity. We must be curious about what's occurring. You as the being, the life you've cultivated for yourself, what you like about it, what you don't, these kinds of things, and a level of curiosity. And that's the theme of today. Be curious. To be curious about what's happening, who you are, where you are, and ultimately where you're going. And it's a lot to take on for obvious reasons, to think about all of these things. But if you can pick one thing to focus on, that's a good thing. And last night, you spoke about something. A place where you're challenged. And wouldn't it be useful and interesting if you were to choose it as it is? Exactly how it is. Not how it's supposed to be or the future version of it, these kinds of things. Exactly how it is. And in that embraces acceptance. And in the acceptance can come curiosity, that you become curious about this experience and you in it. And through the curiosity, potentially move it along, to transform it. And what's so interesting about transforming a challenge is you must transform yourself. That's the ask. That's the request, that's the demand, however you want to put it, is that not only will the experience transform, ideally, you will transform as a consequence of your efforts. And that is significant. It's brilliant in various different ways, and that's why it's better to have a problem than no problem, because you're pursuing something that has meaning. And typically, as I mentioned, the meaning is on the, yes, through the experience, but certainly on the other side when you become triumphant and you've overcome an obstacle in your life. And what comes out of that is strength and courage that will not just be given to you, It's like one of those things that has to be earned. You got to earn your stripes in so many different ways. It's like, okay, what am I going to overcome today that I need to, that will give me the inner strength that I know I need to stand up tall, straight in this world? And that's kind of like the stance every day, right? It's like, okay, I got to put my feet on the ground. I got to pick myself out of bed. It's like, okay, here we go. This wild ride we're on as a human being. And so if you think of the theme of the day, be curious, well, what's the opposite of that? I'm always curious about that. Two sides of the equation, one concept, what's the opposite of that concept? Be curious. And it goes something like being the know-it-all, where there's a lack of curiosity, draped in arrogance, something like that. I know enough about you. You're no longer curious. And so I'll put you here and then over there. And if I figured you out, I have to pay attention to you less. And that's the attempt. I'll figure you out, and I'll put you off to the side, and I can pay attention to you less because I already figured you out. And that's how we can shuffle through life. And if you look at your relationships, that's true. If you really look at your relationships, there's a part of you that thinks that you figured these people out, which is absurd in so many different ways. And we can be in a relationship with somebody for decades, 25, 30 years, something like that, and barely know them. Barely know them, and convince ourselves that we know them deeply. And that creates a tremendous amount of tension within us, within the relationship for sure. And that posture, that mindset is a fixed mindset. That's what we want to explore today through these distinctions. A fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, they're different. And that's what's up on the board this morning. Fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset is, nah, I already know enough. You're not going to teach me anything new. I've learned what I need to learn from you. Now be quiet. Or do what you're supposed to do. These kinds of things. And so up on the board, fixed mindset, talent and abilities are largely fixed and predetermined. This is it. Nothing's going to change. This is how it is. And we can get trapped up into those kinds of experiences as well. Nothing's ever going to change. This is how it is. I'm never going to change. My situation's never going to change. They're never going to change. And that can lead us into complaints. You ever complain? Oh, some smiles, twinkles in the eyes. You ever fall into a complaint? That's an example of a fixed mindset. If you complain about one thing, the tendency you'll complain about another thing, and then another thing. And then what ends up happening is just simply a walking complaint. And if you ever spent time with somebody that complains, it's horrific. It's dead. There's nothing in that. It sucks everything out of space. If you really to pause and to feel into that experience, there's nothing new in complaints. And there's a difference between expressing to move something, it's like, oh, this is challenging and, hate this or whatever it is. If the intention is to move it. But complaints aren't typically like that. It's just complaining about somebody, your job, your boss, your partner, whatever. And that's what keeps us trapped. It keeps other people in a trap as well. There's nothing new. And so the view is permanent. There's no possibility of change. It's permanent. This is it. And this is what I have to deal with. Whew. And that viewpoint supports resignation. That's what it supports. That's the end. That's the end game. That's the outcome in some ways, is resignation. So in a fixed mindset, the proposition is that you're practicing resignation. Perhaps the best way of putting it. It's supported by arrogance. I already know enough, as I mentioned. I already know enough. And the outcome is being fragmented and devastated. It's a hell of a thing. And some of you are there now. Some of you are fragmented. You could say, We're all fragmented in our own way. You could say that. Devastated, maybe. That's where honesty has to take shape. How fragmented are you? Is there a semblance or is there a state, an experience of feeling devastated in some area of your life? And I imagine the answer would be yes, somewhere. If you really think about what you spoke about last night, the tension spot, what you'll notice in that is that there's a complaint. And that complaint is a fixed mindset. And through that fixed mindset, nothing will ever change. There's no possibility for change in a fixed mindset. It's permanent. So if you think about a relationship, I don't know, to work, to a family member, to a partner. And it's very difficult to wake up every day and to set ourselves up into that yet again. It's a soul-crushing experience in some sense. And so the idea is not to set ourselves up for that. You all know what that feels like, each of you, what I'm speaking about, being lodged into a fixed mindset. You are that right now. That's one of the explorations here during our time, is to start to understand the fixed mindset you have of yourself. And if that's true for you, how fixed you are about how you see yourself, that'll be true with everybody else in your life. And we're incredibly fixed. And that's how we stay fragmented. And so this is a great endeavor into how fixed you are and to spell it out in a very specific way. And that's the journey we are on. That's the journey we are on. To boil you down to your fixed mindset so you can really start to understand why you suffer the way in which you suffer. And it is so unique to you as the individual. You know how to create deep suffering for yourself and know exactly how to torture yourself. And you know that better than anybody else. That is true. And that's how we can create what we create in our lives. There's no other possibility for anything else, and that's why it's so important to pull ourselves out of it. And so that's the attempt through practice. It's to pull ourselves out of fixed mindsets and set ourselves up for something different that'll give us access to growth. I'll give you an example of a fixed mindset for me. I don't deserve good things. That's a fixed mindset, a presupposition I have. I do not deserve good things. And that has left me fragmented and devastated more often than I'd like to admit. I can assure you of that. Because what it set me up for is settling. And if you've ever settled, that is a gut-wrenching experience. And sometimes we can settle for, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, a couple of days, a week. Sometimes it's a lifetime. And some of you shared last night some examples of where you have settled, or potentially where you are settled now, and how difficult that is. And so to think about the various different fixed mindsets you have and where they take you. Know where you'd like to be, that is for sure. And so the opposite of what I'm speaking about is growth mindset. And there's a definition up on the board. Abilities and talents are malleable skills that you can cultivate and strengthen at any time. And you can see that potentially on your yoga mat. If you're on your yoga mat enough, it's like, okay, this new pose, I'm going to take you on, damn it. Okay, it looks fun. Stand on my hands. So I'm going to try that out. Or stand on your head, or whatever the hell you do on your mat. It requires curiosity, growth mindset, and you take it on. And if you stick with it, you change as a consequence of growth mindset. Whoa, I'm standing on my hands. Or I'm in wheel, or whatever, a new pose. That through persistence, you are able to grow yourself through it. And there's a part of you that really appreciates the practice of yoga through this lens. It's giving you access to something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, so committed to being on your mat. And that's worth recognizing. What about your yoga practice, you being on your mat, that you appreciate, that keeps bringing you back, practice after practice, day after day? It's something about the pursuit of something curious in your life. And the practice of yoga gives you that access. It'll be something like that. And the view is, it's a starting point that we can start anything at any time, which is kind of great to hold it like that. It's like, okay, yeah, I can start this now, today. Even though I'm a fool, have no skill, can barely take care of myself, all the things that we're up against, but this is a starting point and I'm going to start it because it means something to me. You exercise, I don't know, the way in which you feed yourself, the way in which you communicate and listen, all these different things, starting point. This is a starting point for you. The adventure into teaching. It's a starting point. Here you are in a yoga teacher training, attempting to start your teaching endeavor. And how important it is to hold true to a growth mindset. And in that is studentship. You get to be the student, which is great, and that's important. As we've spoken, you being the student, your skill set around being a student will inform you as a teacher. And that's important to recognize and know. To hold true to being a student, first and foremost, student first, student last kind of experience, that we'll never know enough. And so this is supported by humility, a growth mindset, which is in part understanding the level of arrogance you have and to be able to manage your arrogance and ignorance. And that's important because it's so tempting to keep putting ourselves in a box and other people in a box. To convince ourselves that we know enough. I don't need to know anything more. You're not going to teach me anything. I don't need to learn anything. I know enough. And we have to constrain that. And that has to be a conscious effort. Otherwise, it'll just take over. And it's the posture of humility. And you could argue which is the posture of a student. The humble posture. And the outcome, you become learned and sophisticated. And that's important. You become sophisticated as a consequence of your actions as a student. And so to think about these various different experiences, fixed mindset and how fixed you are in various different ways, and where you have a growth mindset, you could look at your life and notice where you're thriving. Where? Somewhere in your life. That's true. There's a relationship you have to something or someone that you feel really good about. And if you investigate and explore, what you'll notice is that there's a growth mindset that's supporting that relationship to whatever it is. That you've postured yourself in that relationship. And I'm curious, and you get to teach me something, and I'm here to learn and to contribute. And if I do that for you, maybe you'll do that for me. That's fun. We can learn together and get closer and have the kind of bonds that we say we want. Maybe experience some intimacy along the way. Tantalizing. And so think about a fixed mindset that you have. Maybe if you explore last night's conversation, where you're challenged in life currently, perhaps you can pluck out the fixed mindset that lives there. Or in some other experience. And that's a question for you. What's a fixed mindset that you rely on? Who will say something out loud, a fixed mindset that you rely on that keeps you fixed and tormented in some ways. Maybe it's towards yourself, maybe it's towards someone else, something.
I can't learn this.
I can't learn this.
Any other.
Okay, yeah, it's like I can't.
I'm not going to do it.
Okay, not going to be able to do it. Great, fixed mindset, fantastic.
I can't cook.
I can't cook. Great, yeah, which prevents you from cooking. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, good. Okay, you feel like you're not seen. Okay, yeah, fixed mindset. And very difficult in relationship to enter into a relationship that I'm not going to be seen. Something like that. Yeah, very good. Who else? Fixed mindset. What do you got out there? Unable to let go. Yep. Just resigned into the experience of what you got. Stuck. Yep. Great. Absolutely. Anybody else? Fixed mindset that has haunted you or is? I can't change the patterns. Okay. Very good. Yeah. And there's resignation attached to that. You know, that tendency to give up and settle. This is how it is. This is how it'll always be. How we can victimize ourselves through fixed mindsets. That's a tendency. Okay, good, great. And so these are the things that you need to combat, essentially. And to have them out in front of you is good. And if they're not out in front of us, what ends up happening is they have us. And that's not ideal. And so if you think about the fixed mindset you just mentioned, the idea is to build out a counter perspective. So you already have that and you're stuck with it. That ain't going anywhere. You've relied on it too heavily. And so it's a mechanism that you've built into yourself that will stay and remain. And so if you're able to build out a counter perspective and practice that, you could grow that from I can't cook to I will cook. And over some time, what will happen is you build skill around cooking. It's kind of great, right? Good for you. It's nourishing. Something you can feel satisfied and satiated about, also proud of. Those kinds of things. Yeah, brilliant.
I can't cook yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's moving into places we don't necessarily want to go. And the reason why, and this is the consideration why we don't want to go into these places, is because they're risky. They're a threat. What they represent is failure. What they represent is failure. It's like, okay, I have to embrace this. I have to take on this challenge that there is a possibility I may fail. And if I do, what does that mean? And what you'll notice in the failing, that represents something to you, which is yet another fixed mindset. And so it's one fixed mindset after another fixed mindset. And that's the trap we can live in. And so to break that apart is important, but we have to choose one and build out another. And to continuously do that. And that's a sophisticated practice that requires attention, time, energy, nurturing, so on and so forth. As I mentioned, fixed mindset I've had, I don't deserve good things. A tendency to settle, feel like I'm taken advantage of and disappointed. I know that experience very well. It also bridges into, I'll never be nurtured. The very thing that is important to me, one of, is the experience of feeling nurtured. And so that's how one fixed mindset can bridge into the next and bridge into the next. And soon we're living a life out of fixed mindsets. And so the benefit of practice is to break these things apart. If you can consider Kriyas as an example, it's like, are you willing to break these things apart? And in large part, my experience that this will not happen through a passive experience, a passive practice. It has to be assertive. It has to be sometimes aggressive to move these things out of you in a way that you can shake yourself up enough to create the space that you need to cultivate something new, which is a mindset. And so if you think of these kriyas that we're doing, we're shaking and moving, these kinds of things. To get out of this suit, you know, the armor, these things that we can, this posture that we can live in, move in weird ways, ways that we don't typically move. It's like, aha, okay, finally, now I got some space. I can think differently. That's neat. That's different. And so that's the attempt through our morning runs. Okay, we'll chant, we'll kriya, we'll meditate, we'll practice, and all these kinds of things. To have something out in front of you, and that's a growth mindset. Something worth pursuing, and to notice that you are the being that is becoming, and you want to understand what you're becoming. If you're becoming the same person over and over again, you already know the trap you're in. You'll become more fragmented, more devastated. If you can have a growth mindset out in front of you and flounder forward towards it, like the bumbling fool that you are, as we all are, that's a good use of time. Because at some point, we will experience the reward of our efforts. That's the recipe. Day in and day out, trusting the practice, moving ourselves along. And so choose wisely today. Why are you choosing what you're choosing? And to have the level of curiosity you need to shape out your future. If I choose this, what is it going to get me? If I choose that, what is it going to get me? Today, tomorrow, next week, 5 years from now. What is the choice I'm making now? How is that going to dictate my future? And to have that level of vision is useful. To paint these things out. Because what you'll notice through that process is there's a destination that you like, and there's a destination that you do not like. And so what will you choose? And to choose that wisely today. This is the theme. Be curious about why you're choosing what you're choosing. And become who you wish to be. That's the plan. That's the idea. And so, the question to you is, what's a growth mindset that may counter what you mentioned? What's the growth mindset that will counter the fixed mindset you just spoke of? Anybody have an example? Ashley?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, over yesterday and today, right, like there's a lot to digest and a lot to be thinking about, so I feel like I have like so many things coming up that I'm like processing and thinking about. So when you think about like the Kriyas, do you think it's like most helpful to think about like one of these like beliefs or fixed mindsets and like really be trying to work that out, or trying to just kind of think about several things or thinking about the growth? Like, is it helpful to focus, or just kind of like try and work it out in the way that the body does?
Yeah, I mean, there's benefits on both. You know, choosing one thing and focus on that one thing, and then also just allowing the Kriyas to work you over. My preference is to choose one thing. That's my preference. That's typically my practice, is to choose one thing and work into it, make sense of it, and to notice how I move within it and how I can move that one experience along. And it's useful in challenges at times. You know, if you're working through a challenge, the Kriyas is like no better way to move that forward, get into the emotions. And it's a weird thing to, it's a strange proposition. It's like, yeah, get on your mat and practice anger, practice disappointment, practice sadness, practice guilt, practice shame, practice fear. Do that. You won't hear that very often, especially in the yoga world. It's like smile and you're a wonderful being and everything's great. That's how it can be, you know, on the most shallow side of yoga. But it's like, get into yourself. You know what you need to move. What's the emotion you feel you need to move more than any other emotion? It's kind of gripped you. You spoke about it last night. Yeah. And what a brilliant thing to practice, fear. And if you get to know yourself through fear, there'll be distinctions and you'll be able to integrate it. That's significant. And then you can use it in a way that actually is fulfilling. There's a tremendous amount of energy in fear, right? And the tendency is it holds us back. You know, it's like, we hold ourselves back through fear. If we can transform our relationship to fear and use it in a way that it actually propels us, it's different. And that's the possibility for you, which is fantastic. That you can start to have the conversations you need to have, right? And have fear and the energy of fear and move yourself along. And for you, it's, you can look at fear a few different ways. No matter what you do, there's going to be fear. The fear of not speaking and the fear to speak. You already know what you get from not speaking. It's nothing you want to relive again. And so that should terrify you more than speaking. That you're willing to take the risk even though there's fear present. But your future is at stake. And that is true. Your future is at stake. And so to work the fear that way, it's like, I'm going to say this because I need to say it, even though there's fear present. But it'll be better as a consequence. I will be better as a consequence. My life will be better as a consequence. And that's an interesting practice. I want to say this, I don't want to say this. I want to say this, I don't want to say this. And it's like this back and forth. But then it's the leap of faith. and that accompanied with the courage you have. It's a lethal combination. Lethal. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So the more you can define yourself, the more you find yourself, and that's choosing your limitations. Keep doing that voluntarily. Choose. Work in it. Deeply. As deeply as you can. To notice what bubbles up as you do. Okay, everybody, it'll be one hell of a day today. Day 3, can you imagine? We were jumping in. I deal with both feet. All right. It is that time, it's practice time. You move yourself to your mats. That would be superb.